Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Implementing Zero Trust with Appaegis, sponsored by Appaegis. My name is Carol Auth of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Matt Bromiley, SANS Analyst and Incident Responder, and Sandro Janita, Zero Trust Solutions Architect at Appaegis. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Let's try that again, shall we? Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. I noticed that my microphone was not going up and down, but I look and now it is. So I think we're here. My name is Matt Bromiley, and I'm with the SANS Institute, as Carol specified, and I'm excited today to be joined by Sandro. Sandro, how you doing?
I'm doing good today, Matt. How about yourself? Thank you for having us.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having us, actually, other way around. So this is our chance to talk about getting hands-on and getting some insight into Appaegis and all the things that you guys showed us. So this is part of our SANS First Look series, everyone. This is one of those moments where we get a chance to kind of view a product or a platform or a solution alongside the vendor and get an idea of what it is, what problems they're trying to tackle, what they're trying to help organizations solve, and how they're going about doing that. And as you can tell right here, it's pretty obvious based on the title. Appaegis does an amazing job of approaching that zero trust architecture or that zero trust problem, or should I say solution, actually, Sandro. I think zero trust is more the solution towards information security, securing the assets inside of your environment, and helping you kind of redefine what that environment actually is. Sandro, I know we've got a lot of stuff packed into today's presentation. I know we've got some slides lined up. We're going to have a demo in the latter third of this as well. But before we do that, I wanted to just give you a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who Appaegis is, what y'all do. Well, sorry, who's Sandro first? And then what Appaegis is, what y'all are about, and we can start to work our way through this.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks for the time, Matt. My name is Sandro Janita. I'm with the solution architecture team here at Appaegis. Background-wise, I've been working in the security space for close to 20 years now, if not longer. Started off with firewalls, migrated to like Appaegis. More recently, I've been knee-deep into cloud-type security technologies. Now with Appaegis, really interesting technology, and what kind of drew me to this space was, zero trust as a strategy, right? It's kind of nice. It looks good on paper, but there's still a lot of problems to be solved, right? And my feeling was that Appaegis, with the founders, they really solved a lot of the problems. The one with getting started, but also is how do you take zero trust and make it more consumable, but more importantly is how do you take it from concept to actually implementation as far as helping customers with their zero trust strategies. And so as we go along, we'll go a little bit deeper, but thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's I think you called out perhaps one of the most important parts of this is making zero trust approachable, easier to implement, easier to understand, and things along that line. And I think that is I think that's probably one of the best ways to catalog what it is we actually want to cover today is, a lot of folks out there have heard of this particular type of approach. Maybe they've started to implement this type of approach. They're playing around with it. And now we want to be able to go through and talk about ways to implement it and ways to go about doing that. So, we can go ahead and start to roll some slides if you want to, but I want to make this more of a discussion between you and I and everything. And I want to first start out with the idea of zero trust as kind of a strategy. How do you see, given everything you've seen during your career, how do you see zero trust strategies evolving from a security perspective, from an implementation perspective, and some of the various things that you've been exposed to? But how do you see zero trust? Like, how did we get here, right? How did we get to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors, but the one driving factor that I've been tracking that I see a lot of customers kind of moving towards, which is hybrid cloud. In other words, customers are migrating their infrastructure. They're taking advantage of cloud, right? In other words, the agility, kind of the cost savings, things like that, right? And that definitely provides advantages for customers in terms of accelerating their business models and so on. But from the security perspective, it really does create a nightmare because thinking like traditional terms, your legacy kind of segmented network based on VLANs, IP addresses, those perimeters really just kind of go out the door, right? Once you start migrating to the cloud, where your resources are kind of agile, they could be across multiple clouds. They could be even within the same cloud. They could be deployed into multiple regions, multiple AZs, and so on. And that distribution of where your data is, where your resources, your applications are, right? It becomes even more important to implement something like Zero Trust, where now, where there are no very well-defined boundaries. The only well-defined boundary now is me as a user, right? In other words, my identity and then the permissions that I've been granted or entitled to access a resource and application and so on. And so in this day and age, as far as where we're at, as far as I've talked with a lot of customers in the past few years, and I don't think I've talked with one customer that has not had a toe or a foot or 2 feet into the cloud, right? And so it's needed, right? That we move in this direction.
I was actually just on a webcast yesterday where we were talking about exposure into the cloud, and we were talking about cloud footprints and everything. And I think the smallest number, the smallest representation I had of yes, we're in the cloud was like 94% or something like that. It pretty much is everyone that's out there. So, all right, well, let's stay on that kind of cloud thing, that cloud topic, if you will. And, we've got a lot of organizations, and I said this on a webcast earlier today, and I've said it multiple times before. The past 24 months really accelerated, I think, any projects that anyone had in their organization. So why should Zero Trust be something that's in the conversations when we're talking about this cloud migration, whether it's hybrid, multi-cloud infrastructures, whatever approach my organization wants to take? Why should we be talking about Zero Trust while we're planning for this? What's the value there?
Yeah, from the extreme side, let's talk about cyber attacks. They're not going away. In fact, they're only increasing. Especially with what's been happening in the past 2 years, with the workforce being distributed, and now they're no longer in that safe perimeter, right? And so it's created a lot of vulnerabilities for companies, to kind of manage access, right? It's to centralize access, more importantly, to put some controls in place. And in the past couple of years, a lot of IT teams that we saw were kind of scrambling to kind of patch security together, just to kind of react, to this kind of remote work kind of environment, right? And which again is not going away. And combine that with migration to the cloud, it really gets to the point now where a lot of security admins that we talk with is they kind of have an idea as far as where the resources are and who should have access to what. But there's a lot of gray area as far as, long-term and so on, who really should have access to this resource, this data and so on, right? And so it's not just a single snapshot in time kind of security mindset, right? It's something that you really have to think about long-term. And this is where Zero Trust, with proper auditing, visibility, and so on, can really help because, in the history of security, it's never been a static kind of configuration. Back in the day, we would talk about router configurations were somewhat straightforward and, they're somewhat set and forget. That's really not the case with security. I'm sure you're aware of that, right? Where, your applications change, people move and so on. Access has to kind of migrate with your business, right? And so Zero Trust really is more aligned operationally and also security-wise, to kind of move with your business these days, as opposed to something like a legacy VPN or a traditional, network isolated or network segmented type of perimeter security.
Yeah, certainly. No, I think that's a very valid way to consider it, as well as kind of that approach. Well, okay, so I do want to make sure we take a chance to focus. Maybe I think you brought up some very, very good points, and we can take kind of a security mind or an operational mind on that. Either one you outlined there. I think we did kind of talk a little bit about why Zero Trust, should be involved in security conversations, should be involved in security strategy and things like that. But are you seeing, based on what you said, and I know a few minutes ago you said you've yet to meet someone who isn't in the cloud in some way, shape, or form. Are you seeing there that that folks are still hesitant to adopting Zero Trust? Because if I'm moving more and more towards the cloud, I would feel like Zero Trust would be something that would I could just kind of tag on to that approach and just be like, hey, do this too, right? But then again, I take the very naive, aware mind frame that every time something is deployed, the security team has full visibility to it as well. And again, I'm aware of the how naive that seems. But what hesitation do you think you see out there when it comes to kind of zero trust. And what I want to do, Sandro, with this question is I want to use this maybe as a way to say, hey, here's the things that you should be thinking about from an operational perspective. And then if you've got anything to support this discussion as you go through it, please feel free to change slides and bring over to that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, let's drill into that a little bit. So last year, for example, when we were at Black Hat, we had a lot of customers, stop by the booth. Definitely zero trust was top of mind. A lot of customers, they understand zero trust. They understand the security benefits and so on. But there's that operational hurdle of how do I get started with this, right? Because what they're used to, for example, with legacy VPNs, even ZTNAs, it's a pretty long drawn out process to deploy at enterprise scale, even for a small office, right? There's a lot of things that have to align almost perfectly to actually start deploying even ZTNA. You have to align things like OSs, right? You have to align agents with those OSs, patches, and things like that. And then you have to align the infrastructure with the deployment of things like connectors and so on, right? And some ZTNA vendors even require things like public IP addresses to be published and so on. So that biggest pushback from what I've seen is I want to get started. Not with the least amount of effort. I don't like to use that word easy, but I want the least impact on my users, my infrastructure, right? Because for me, as a security admin, small team or big teams, these are things that get in the way of allowing their users to do their jobs, right? And whenever you introduce something like that, there's always kind of a long drawn out design process. And so that operational aspect of how do I get started to reap the benefits of zero trust, that's usually been, one of the biggest concerns that I've had. In addition to that is, with security in general, whenever you put something in line is, what is going to break, right? I still have to worry things about like incompatibilities and things like that. And, kind of leading into where we're at, we can address those, in some of the later slides here as we kind of go along.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a pretty valid answer, right? I think that's probably one of the most important ones is what are we going to break? What's going to be impacted by this? And, what's going to happen here? So, let's kind of shift the conversation now. We've got, about 17 minutes or so, and I know you've got a demo lined up for us as well. But if you want to take some time and maybe talk about IAC, which is the product that we got to get kind of eyes on with and get some insight into and everything, feel free to take it away. I'd love to hear you kind of give us insight into how the platform can help solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah, and so the founders, they're really focused on a couple of things, right? One is how do you kind of take the next step with zero trust and improve the security that it offers? But more importantly is how do you get over that friction of helping customers deploy it in a very easy, simple way, straightforward and so on. And so from a high level, Appaegis Access Platform, what we provide is secure access to your users, to corporate resources deployed in any cloud. And, per zero trust, we're always verifying the identity and we're always authorizing access based on their entitlements and so on. And so the three main goals that we kind of set forth, with our solution, which is to help customers simplify the onboarding of zero trust. And we'll go into some use cases, always identity-based access. In other words, zero trust principles and so on. But more importantly, what we're doing is we're actually kind of translating that to across the board. So across web, across SSH, RDP, Kubernetes now. We're actually getting a lot of inroads into dev and DevOps and ops access. And more importantly, this is kind of our secret sauce here, which is our prevention mode. If you kind of frame things as far as permission abuse, that really can manifest itself in a lot of vulnerabilities in the sense of if I have a exploited endpoint, for example, and I connect using a legacy VPN, I more or less have network connection at that point. And so the ability for an infected endpoint to infiltrate internal resources really is magnified, with legacy VPNs. Whereas, what we're doing with our IAC or our Isolation Access Cloud, this is really where we're kind of taking our flavor of zero trust down to the resource level. And what I mean by that is one of the core technologies of our secure access platform is browser isolation. And so whenever a user connects to our portal, we will connect them to your resources internally. But what we're doing on the back end for security reasons is we are spinning up a container. for that user. So whether they're accessing web, SSH, RDP, Kubernetes, what we're doing is we're providing that browser isolated access, and that has multiple benefits in terms of operational and also security. So let's drill into security, for example, and as far as the permission abuse and the prevention of things like ransomware. So browser isolation as a technology is very mature now. 10 plus years now, no known exploits of ransomware being able to move laterally. In other words, from an infected endpoint through a browser isolated access to an internal device. And so, that is probably one of the use cases that we talk about security-wise, benefiting from using browser isolation. But there are many others. So for example, if you think about identity theft, one of the common ways that identity theft is executed is, say a user uses or loses their laptop, for example, or their handheld devices. What will happen is, an attacker may harvest the information in their cache. A lot of users these days, unfortunately, will store passwords in their browser, right? Definitely not best practice, but it's common, in this day and age. And so it becomes an easy target to harvest credentials and so on. But even in those cases, if the user is logged off, there's no shared passwords, usually there's some remnants of corporate information, based on the applications that they've accessed that's still in the cache of that browser. Browser isolation really solves that problem in the sense that, all the information is kind of in the container that we spin up for the user. And all of that information, as far as cached, no password management use cases and so on, that is really kind of negated by using BI in the middle there. But more importantly now, in our case, it actually allows us to implement even deeper type of permission controls. And an example of that is, not just across web, but also across SSH and RDP. And we'll see this in the demo here pretty quickly, is that we can allow security admins to implement policy controls at the gateway level, for example, for SSH and RDP, previous blind spots for a lot of IT teams, whereas now we can provide transaction level activity monitoring. And what that means is, as a user is transferring files, as a user is utilizing applications in RDP, we can make those visible. But more importantly, is we can stand in line and prevent things like permission abuse. In other words, does that user really need to download, this many files? In fact, do they even need to download files, right? Which causes data sprawl and so on. And what we found is that definitely legacy VPNs are somewhat limited or very limited, but even current ZTNA solutions, they may provide those type of permission level controls for web applications, but certainly not for SSH and RDP and Kubernetes. And so, this is where we kind of take our flavor of zero trust and extend it, not just to the authorization of access to an application, but now the fact that we're always in line, the fact that we're always monitoring the transactions and the permissions activity, we can go a step further with our zero trust, down to the resource level, down to the click level, almost, whenever a user accesses an application. And a big part of that is kind of brought on or enabled, with our browser isolated access. I'll stop there for comments and feedback.
No, all good. That's exactly, I think, what we wanted to hear and see was, exactly how do y'all go about doing exactly this? I think there's a lot of good takeaways for our audience attendees here, and I'm guessing you're probably about to jump into your demo, Sandro. But before you do, I'll just kind of let you get ready for that, number one, and then number two, also kind of talk about I really like what I really liked about getting hands-on with this platform and getting insight into it is really just kind of the sprawl of coverage that y'all have on board. And I'm kind of talking to the screen that's here, and I'm glad you started here because I wanted to bring this up. But if you think about the varying and the amount of, so think about the different types and the quantity of cloud-based or I should say applications and services and things that are out there that organizations are taking on board, managing access to all of these, managing permissions, managing controls, ensuring that the right people are doing the right things and only the right things are done by only the right people. These are lots of complicated questions to answer. And I really like the insight that that the platform gave us, and I really like the integrations that it's got as well. And judging, talking about the technologies you had listed up there earlier, these are exactly the things that I want to be able to get arms around as an organization. I want to be able to lock down my remote access. In fact, I just finished some work on one of our ransomware papers. And I know we're not talking about ransomware here and but remote access solutions is one of our case studies that we talked about, as this is a common way in. This is a common thing that needs to be shut down or logged or monitored or wrapped up. And you've got the capability in there, which is great. I'm going to let you go ahead and walk through the demo. Sandro, I'll jump on when you're done, and I'll be happy to kind of take us out. I think we've got about 10 minutes left, which is exactly the amount of time you need. But feel free to take it away. To our attendees, just a quick FYI, I think the rest of this presentation is probably going to be mostly the demo, if not a little bit more back and forth between Sandro and myself. But if you do have any questions or comments or anything, I do have my eye on the Q&A window. Please feel free to go ahead and ask them, and I'll bring them up live if I can. Otherwise, Sandro, show us the magic and how it works.
All right, thank you again. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through two use cases. One is for, how do you control permissions for web-based applications? And then the second use case that I'll walk through here as far as the configuration will be, how does you as a security admin, for example, enforce best practices? And we'll see that in the SSH demo. So, with our browser-based access, we, allow users to secure access both to SaaS-based applications and even more so for internal-based applications as well. Just for the sake of example here, we do have customers that are using our systems on top of what they're already using for their SaaS-based applications as well. I'm going to go ahead and just log in here. Sorry about this. I have to wait for my code. But this actually serves as a good example of our tracking, but also our controls as well. So I'm going to log into my OneDrive here, and kind of think of the point of, how do you enable your users, to do their jobs, but at the same time, how do you allow security teams to enforce security best practice as well? So for me as a user, for example, I have full capabilities here to, access the data and resources that I need for my jobs. I can edit this and so on. I can save it and so on. I can manipulate things, but do I really need to do things like, download this file? Or from a catalog perspective, do I need to be able to, download, many versions of this file, for example, right? Because what will happen is, once this sheet goes through iterations, there may be more corporate data, that's added here. So in this current policy here, I'm able to download the files. But if I go in here, really quickly, if I change this to just access no uploads, downloads, and it is this quick. The impact on the user here is I don't have to ask them to log out, log back in. But now, I do have the controls to, prevent this user from being able to download this file here. And then you'll see a pop up here. So this is actually going to fail here. And what happened was that the controls were put in place. And at the same time, I have full visibility of this action. And then I can alert on this as well. And so if you go to things like the data inspection, so just FYI, on top of our own, file-based access, transaction level access, what we're doing also is, we have by default enabled our DLP engine. And so what we're doing is we're tracking personal data within the files. If you kind of track this here, it is full featured. We're doing full decryption, full analysis of the files and so on to determine, the internals and looking for specific patterns and so on. So this is always on. In our case, it's not an afterthought. But now from a bigger picture, for example, and this goes back to security teams needing to have visibility into the user's activity, but more importantly is, how do you continuously audit access to be able to narrow down access even further? And so we'll provide a full, very detailed list of access from a specific user, also from teams and groups and so on. But if you look at our daily activities for the specific user here, we provide a lot of detailed information. And this is actually where we get a lot of interest from customers in that, we provide the visibility that other solutions were not able to. So for example, whenever a user accessed an application, whether it's a SSH, web-based, RDP, and so on, we will provide visibility into those actions. And more importantly now, these can be translated into actionable policies as well. And so let's take a look at how that will look, for example, for SSH specifically here. So as I go to SSH, we have one DevOps customer where, their goal was to remove any type of, bad practice. And what that means is the use of things like shared passwords, static passwords, things like that. And what we've done with our configuration here is, we have, or the admins are just allowing access to these internal applications. It could be a router, it could be a switch, it could be a Kubernetes stack, it could be a server access, in the cloud and so on, right? What we're doing is now the admins can enforce best practice. Let's use key-based access. I do not want to allow things like shared passwords or static passwords, because those are like the bane of security teams, because once those are lost, then those are like losing the keys to the kingdom, right? And so this is the benefit that one of our customers is using our centralized platform for. At the same time, if you see the upload download buttons here, again, our policy controls as far as activity controls, they're always on. And then our data inspection applies again to SSH RDP as well. So that was kind of a quick overview of some of the use cases here. And I know that we're kind of running short on time here, Matt. And I'll just transition here to.
You're good, Sandro. You've still got about 5 minutes or so, about about 4 minutes. So you've still got some time to work through other things. You still got time.
Okay, perfect. And so, changing access for this, again, it's just very dynamic. And so let's take a look at this, for example, here with this SSH. Now, let's say, for example, you may be in a incident response type scenario where you have to quickly shut down access. Here, you can do this centrally. This can be based on the teams that have access to this application, to the users. Once I click save here, boom, those controls are gone. You revoke access pretty quickly here. And so, that idea of lifecycle management for access, right? We've really taken that to heart, because, with the auditing that we provide and the controls that we can apply dynamically, onboarding is as quick as revocation as well, right? And so that type of balance are some of the controls that, we want to enable and empower our security admin customers to have. And, it actually is really easy, because as you configure your policies, right? If you do want to alert on certain actions, it's certainly possible. That is configurable. You can do things like geofencing. In other words, was this infraction happening outside of the realm of a normal access, for example, right? And so you can track down anomalies, but at the same time, let's go back to that example of in a lot of enterprise environments, they're providing some very broad permissions, right, for files, data within the network. And when you're managing permissions at scale, it's really hard to get an idea at times as far as who really needs access to what. And so this could be a starting point where now you can put some guardrails, first on alerting you, and then later on, you can deny, based on certain parameters as well. But then what that will look like, from an alerting standpoint is, these can be sent via email. The log information that we viewed earlier can be sent to a syslog for correlation, and so on. And so from a kind of security ops perspective, a lot of the data alerting that we provide as well is we definitely want to help our IT security teams manage, not just getting started with zero trust, but more importantly is, how do you just continuously kind of refine the rules? Now, from an onboarding perspective, we do provide agentless access. And what that means is the users, as they log into our portal, they will have full access to the applications. And what that means is even if a user has a legacy VPN, for example, using our agent-based access, what some of our customers are doing is they're allocating access to specific applications that they may have tagged to be more critical than others to use our service, where we can add MFA on top of that, where we can enforce best practice for accessing those type of applications. At the same time, with our portal-based access, we're not interfering in any way. There's no impact on any type of legacy VPN clients, that may be installed, on the endpoints. At the same time, we do have customers that are allowing dev access, and I'm sure you know that dev engineers are very specific and particular about how they access their applications, meaning that they want to use their own local environments. They've customized some of the scripts they have, some automation that they may have built. We can facilitate that as well. We do have an agent that we call Unity. In fact, we just released the 1.0 version a couple of weeks back. And what that entails basically is it's a lightweight agent. And so if your dev engineers do want to use their local terminals, then we can facilitate as well. That way they can use their own local environments, and the impact to those type of, I'll call them power users, is very low, because again, it's very seamless to them. And so if you're looking to manage that aspect of, how do I not slow down my dev engineers? In other words, how do I still enforce security best practice, but not kind of infringe and impact their productivity? With our Unity agent that we just recently released, we can facilitate that balance as well.
Awesome. Sandro, thank you so much. We are right at time, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and say on behalf of SANS, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we did just get a, let me see, we did just get a couple links posted into the chat. There they are. One of them about the first look paper associated with this. The other one is about the IAC, the Appaegis IAC that Sandro's been talking about. On behalf of everyone here at SANS, Sandro, thank you so much for giving us a chance to get hands-on. Thank you so much for giving us a chance to kind of see what y'all are working with and really come across a better way to deploy and configure and look at zero trust. And I hope, a lot of our attendees are going to find some comfort in that and give you guys a call. But with that said, Sandro, thank you again for joining me. Thank you, attendees, for joining us. Carol, I'll hand it over to you for to take us on home. But thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you so much, Matt and Sandro, for your great presentation, and to Appaegis for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.